All right. Hello, everyone. We're gonna get going in just a couple of minutes here. We're gonna play a trailer for Leena's latest film, while a few more people join, and then we'll start with intros. Okay, Leena, you can see my screen and everything, hey?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
I haven't ever seen an apprehension before.
They always known that children were being hurt. They always had solutions, and they chose not to implement those solutions.
What's the history behind the present? Attempts to erase Indigenous languages, Indigenous cultural practices.
There's a young boy who was found frozen to death on the outskirts of Saskatoon. Money, status, education. Who's going to be criminalized and who's not?
The government doesn't want us looking behind their curtain.
There are more Indigenous children in foster care now than at the height of residential schools, 60 scoop. So something is broken and it needs to be fixed.
I think Canadians are shifting into a new consciousness of the violence and understanding that we have a history of genocide and that it's ongoing.
The moment the headlines die, the children do too. And what Canadians need to do is
video
not
is
turn
not
the page.
Oh, everybody's getting to see what I usually watch.
Yeah. Hello. Stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
There. Hi. Hello.
Hello.
So I noticed some people said their video's not working, so we were just playing a trailer of The Good Canadian. So that came out on September 30th for National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. It's a 4-year project that I co-directed, co-produced, co-wrote with David Pickton, longtime journalist himself, been working for over 35 years. David Pickton started at CBC. I also started at CBC. And he went down the route of doing investigative journalism as well as becoming a documentarian and owning his own company. And I started journalism and went to be a documentarian and also, went down the route of doing documentaries. So I noticed do we need a couple of tech check seconds here? Because I know
Yeah.
Wayne,
I think it was you. Yeah, can you
we're
hear
live
us?
on recording, by the way. We're live recording.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
But we all want to be on mute because we're recording and putting this onto YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I can get going with our little intro, and then Leena, I will hand it right back over to you. Sound good? Excellent. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Sarah. I am the program manager for the Growing Indigenous Storytellers Fellowship, of which this training session, and speaker series is part of. Thank you so much for joining the call. We're really glad to have you here. I'm pleased to be representing Journalists for Human Rights today, and I want to thank our lovely partners on this program, the Indigenous Journalists Association and APTN News. Just to get it out of the way, we've got a bit of housekeeping. So we're going to do 25-30 minutes of Leena talking and presenting. Then we're going to have about 10 minutes for questions at the very end. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube, including the question period. So just please keep that in mind. If you have questions but don't want to voice them, please feel free to put them in the chat and then I will ask them at the end. Or when it comes time for the Q&A part, just unmute yourself, raise your hand, and ask your question yourself. So without further ado, I will introduce Leena. So Leena Minifie is Gitxaala and British and is a Vancouver-based journalist and producer and a co-founder of Ricochet Media. As a journalist, she worked at CBC Radio 1 and APTN National News. She reported from Standing Rock, the Pickton trial, and broke the Queen of the North story. She has produced LILY GLADSTONE, Far Out There for PBS, and British Columbia, An Untold History for Knowledge. Leena's directorial debut, for which you just saw the trailer, is the newly released investigative feature documentary, The Good Canadian, for CBC and APTN. And without any longer waiting, Leena, please take us away.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that intro. Thanks everybody for making this your Friday morning. I know we all have our other commitments, and it's really great to see faces here and be able to talk to you about the work I've been doing lately. It's really important. I kind of compare making documentaries or making films. Everybody's really surprised when I tell them sometimes it takes 4 to 6 years to make a film. It's longer than a book. It's longer than a music album. So this film took 4 years. So it was probably about a year in development and 3 years going through production and post. So I really want to talk to you about I guess the process and what it's like as journalists to kind of move over from the daily grind of filing your articles or filing your news pieces, your 2 to 3 minute pieces, on national news or local news, or getting that article in to your editors about what it's like to kind of do something that's 2 hours long, which is a whole different process in the world. And the process is a little bit daunting. Uh, so how we all paired up first is I actually was just finished being series producer. We call series producers in TV also showrunners. Sometimes that word is used. But I was series producer for British Columbia Untold History, which was a 4-part series on knowledge, investigating or I guess not investigating, but researching with my research partner Jennifer Chu, who also joined on The Good Canadian, like 200 different stories of untold history in BC. 160 of those stories made it into the interactive digital timeline on knowledge.ca. You guys can look that up. And then 40 of those stories went into the 4-part series, which Kevin Eastwood directed. So usually I'm a producer researcher or in this case, a director researcher. And David and Sarah Jane had already kind of been developing this idea and thinking, what has happened? What is happening? Who's culpable and complicit? If we are looking at, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission files and the reports that came out, and it's been 10 years since that time, this year, 2025, it's 10-year anniversary. Why is there nobody inside of this talking about who's complicit or complacent? We're always like, we're looking at the victims and what happened to the victims. And as a journalist, I'm usually inside, like my entire career has been based on like going to community, being part of community, reporting from Indigenous community, talking to people who are victims. And this film is really a challenge, which I've been noticing that documentary makers have been challenging a lot lately, is like to turn the lens around 180 and to look at the power, look at the people who are on the other side. We're 5% of the population, non-Indigenous people are 95% of the population, but there's been no documentary about them and their role with cultural genocide or the fatalities or casualties caused. So we wanted to turn the lens around. There's over 100,000 workers in the federal government departments, and then there's more in provincial departments that cross over with Indigenous lives, that intersect, that we're going to say overpower Indigenous lives and their decisions. And we're still wards of the state under the Indian Act. So we still have this separate, but we're supposed to be equal, but separate existence when it comes to being in this country. So we decided it was, first of all, had to be a big idea documentary. A big idea documentary has never been done before with Indigenous issues. And we wanted to look at the data and what's happened in 2025. We've done a lot of historical things. Everyone thinks that, the injustices and other things that are causing deaths in Indigenous communities are like in the past, maybe millennial scoop, maybe 60s scoop, maybe, it was residential school. It's all that we wanted to have something that's contemporary and now that showed things that are still occurring today. And we wanted to turn the camera on the people to ask them, what are you witnessing? What are you seeing as non-Indigenous people who are affecting our lives? And we wanted to make sure, are we getting this data right? Is it actually true? And we were looking at the data that things are actually worse 10 years now after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that was a really surprising part because we were like, I wanted to see, of course, that things got better. And the more we dug and the more we researched, and every single category of health and wellness and survivance and thriving, all the categories actually went down, which is depressing. But like the lifespan of Indigenous people has gone down almost 7.5 years in these last 10 years. The number of kids in care is more than Millennial Scoop, 60 Scoop, residential school all put together, increasing. So it's like you're 17, I think 17.3 times more likely to go into the system and social work system if you're Indigenous. Indigenous women are increasing in the federal prison system. So 50% of women, we only represent 5% of the population in Canada, but 50% of our federal jails are filled with women of our own culture, which is, and how are we tolerating this if things are getting worse? So we know we had to go across the country. As I said, I have reported so much on First Nations, Inuit, and Métis stories, but we knew we had to go across the country. We had to do the opposite of everything I had done before. I had to go into urban areas, talk to non-Indigenous people. Usually I go into First Nations areas and get protocol and work with them. I had to go into, I had to skip those things. I had to go into white spaces and suburban crowds and visit people. We even end up taping people at their cottages and their in the summer, we end up taping some of our interviewees at their like second homes and their cottage suites for the summer. So, kind of a whole topsy-turvy thing, but we wanted to be able to like crack this open for the first time and speak to the other side. Um, so so that's how different that is in my life. And then we can talk about sort of analyzing power and what does power look like. Um, so because we're turning the camera on, we had different questions that we would be asking of the other side. So we're Indigenous people 5%, we had to ask the 95%. We want to ask non-Indigenous people, immigrants, refugees, people who've been working inside these industries, if they're brave enough to also come on camera. So we had a huge research team. We had a research team of about 5 people, including me and David and our EP, Sarah Jane Flynn. Um, some of Chantel Bell Richard just won a Pulitzer Prize for her research on the podcast Stolen with Connie Walker. Jennifer Chu just won, was up for a bunch of Canadian Screen Awards on our last series for British Columbia Untold History. We had one person from Ricochet Media, Derek O'Keefe. We had Paul Barnsley, a veteran journalist who's actually a non-Indigenous journalist who works at APTN. But we had an APTN person even come in. And so we broke some precedents too. So because APTN documentary and news is quite separate, we actually, for the first time, I think, as a independent production, had support. And, Sharon Mackenzie and everybody knew what we were doing. And we told APTN News, like, this is our intentions and what we want to do. It's really the first time an investigative news story has been, one of the first 2 or 3 times, I guess, has been commissioned. But we really wanted APTN to be wrapped up and involved, and they were so supportive. And they were the first on, actually. CBC came on after APTN already promised us to support us. So, because APTN knew intrinsically that we needed to have a non-Indigenous audience for this film. So they knew that Indigenous people were important, but they really wanted to have non-Indigenous people see this as well. And they both agreed to release it on, of course, September 30th, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So with the 5 researchers, we end up researching not only in development, but actually continued out through the production process. So after we started principal photography and prep, we already had been researching and talking to folks. So what you do is you cast. So you cast as wide a net as possible. We probably end up talking with the entire research team. I kind of estimate about 60 people we sent we casted a wide net. We talked about 60 people who we sat down with, had deep Zooms with, had calls, had coffee, had tea, and discussed sort of our idea with them. 12 people were brave enough to continue our relationship and go in front of the camera. We started from the beginning and we made sure that we wanted to go through each silo. We weren't able to cover every single issue in Canada that leads to cultural genocide, of course. There's some things I'm really sad we could miss, but they were almost their own documentaries in their own right that we couldn't fit in. But we knew we wanted to cover the justice system. We knew we wanted to cover the healthcare system. We knew we wanted to cover social work, and we knew we wanted to cover education. And we looked at the stats and data enough that we could actually get some comparison statistics to back up our thesis that there's something that we need to dig into further. We want to talk to people about what's happening now in 2025. So 12 people were super brave, and we honor all of them who were able to be interviewed. Um, and um, they gave us their time. So me and David worked as a co-team in the field. We would both tag team on interviews and be able to go in front of the person and be able to ask our own questions. These interviews were actually 4 to 6 hours in length. We decided that we wanted to go deep and get to people's humanity, kind of get rid of the surface level that you do when you do a 2 minute or a 3 minute news clip. You're kind of looking for that golden nugget or that little tiny bite that you can just wrap up and put into your story. We actually wanted to scrape away people's sort of internal, like we call it like a little bit of a tape recording that they have, or their talk tape that they actually will just go to with their messaging and their talking points. And we wanted to kind of get to the humanity of people. So two of our interviewees end up being interviewed twice. If you watch the film, which is on CBC Gem, APTN Lumley, and YouTube, a little promo there, you'll be able to see that there are some people who came back and went through something significant enough that we had to sit them down twice. So two of our interviewees, one of our interviewees was anonymous because it was going to affect their not only their profession, but had a chance to affect their family deeply where they were living because they worked in social work. There could be retaliation, and some of the things that they experienced could sort of circle back to them and put them in danger. Um, so long interviews. I think our DOP said it was the longest interviews he's ever shot for and he works in documentary long form. So 4 to 6 hours, two being over 2 days, and then really the questions. So what we did before we went to the field for our research team is that either the research team would build us these questions. We're talking like 8 pages of questions. Either myself, David Paperny, my partner, or the research team. One of us would start a first draft, and then we would circulate it, and then based upon you know, being able to kick the can a bit and like see the holes, we would always fix the research questions in order to be much more in depth in the field. We got really specific. So we would go through like 3 to 4, sometimes 5 different versions of the questions before we went out to the field. So that's way different than what you do in regular news. It's much more time, much more involved. Every time a person, because a lot of the people in our film also have books and they are authors. We would go through their research, sometimes their primary data, or we had to read their books before we went to the fields. If anybody had interviews like this on YouTube, or had spoken before in public in any way, we would go through all of their interviews. We'd listen to them on radio. We listened to them, and if they had any presentations as an academic. So this is all preparation before even turning on the camera. So, so that was kind of like what it looked like in the field. And then we went to the fields instead of having, just sort of a rudimentary setup. Like I used to go to the field with like in the old days, like a recorder. Sometimes it would be tape, sometimes it would be the old days of the Discman, which I like the little mini discs, which I used to use for CBC radio, I'm sure all you know. Or your cell phone sometimes to record. We would have as far as a team, usually it would be 5 people out. So me and David, sort of the journalists and the directors tag teaming. We'd also act as field producers. We would have 2 cameras, so main DOP and a second camera. We would have a sound person. And then if we could have our EP join us in the field, that would be it. But mostly, and then sometimes a photographer would always be there as well. So sometimes there would be extra hands for a field producer or for photographer for taking behind the scenes stills. But we also made these beautiful collages. If you watch the film, there's these beautiful collages that are kind of mosaics, and they kind of represent the complication, like people being complicated, not just one-sided, not just one side of their face, but we put these beautiful mosaics together to kind of show the complexity of people, because we wanted to make sure that we represented folks as these complex beings, not just one-sided, one clip. So I would say one of the best things, it was such a good collaboration between me and David. David's 67, has been doing this for a while. I'm not super young. I've been doing this for 25 years. He's been doing this for like 37, 38 years, maybe 40 years. But there's a real true collaboration between a settler, like David himself, and me. And so we were able to kind of get different things from our interviewees. So sometimes they would bond more with David, sometimes they would bond more with me. Sometimes I would play good cop, he'd play bad cop, I play bad cop, he'd play good cop. We would try to tag team it and situate and also, keep those authentic relationships with our interviewees that we built. They're crucial to our story, and so many of them had witnessed things and wanted to talk about what they experienced in the world. Two of these, I can mention as an anecdote, two of these folks had never told their story before. I mean, I think more than that, maybe two, actually three or four, had never told their story before on camera. One story who from one of the retired police officers, Ernie Luted. He had actually never told the Starlight story about himself being the whistleblower. So when we finished recording with him, which was like 3.5, 4 hours, when we turned up the camera, he had actually said, he's like, I never have ever recorded that or told that story to anybody before. So we were lucky to have people go deep with us. Evan again says too, he doesn't talk about his personal story and what made him want to be a medical officer and one of the first chief medical officers in all of Canada to be Indigenous at that level. And of course, the doula that's in has never been videotaped about her experiences intersecting with Indigenous birth, and it's supposed to be at a sacred time. She has seen horrific things happen to Indigenous women and birth alerts, which is in the film. So we were able to get sides and stories of things that, it's our job to kind of get in and build trust with folks and understand that we're going to treat their story in the most respectful way possible. We're going to represent them in the best way we can as holistic human beings, and that we're going to do the right thing with their really intricate, intimate stories. Okay, so different parts of documentary, just so you guys know, when I talked about, so there's development, when you get your idea together, you make a treatment, you kind of make a pitch, you're getting fundraising, you're putting that together. Then there's prep, so you always do prep and do research before you turn the camera on. As soon as you go out into the field and hire your team and go to the field, the first day you step out your feet from those open doors with the camera on your back. It's called principal photography. So that's production. And then after production comes post. And so you have to go to the editing suite and put things together. So you're actually researching, you kind of start archival research too. We have one of the best archival researchers who also was up for a CSA for British Columbia Untold History. The best archival researcher is Casey Lees, who's my favorite, researching archives while we were in the field and recording. We gave her orders to look at certain things, but she continued with us the entire time in order to look at archives as well as pass them, because passing archives is a very huge specialty. And then our editor, Hart, of course, he was on we kind of estimated it would be 6 months, and in my heart of hearts, I knew it was a big idea film. So not a lot of editors do big idea films. Usually they stick to one subject matter, not all subject matter you can squish in. So Hart Snyder stayed on for 9 months of post and was our editor and was magnificent about weaving these tales together and had to spend a lot of time with some really hard material. We took people through training just so you guys have an idea, like under Indigenous Screen Office protocols for film, doesn't matter if you're documentary or reality show or scripted or this journalism. We took people through training, so we had people at the very beginning of our show do at least a day of training, not only through protocols, but like diversity and equity, and then also what our approaches would be and looking at systemic issues of racism and systemic issues in ourselves, so we can actually dig into kind of the material and look at those things before we went to the field. Also, love to use Duncan McHugh's Reporting Indigenous Communities book as a hand guide. That is a textbook I love using. There's a really great pullout in the book that talks about looking at yourself. We knew we were going to be dealing with really hard issues. And there's a pullout in the book that everybody got a photocopy of to just check themselves, to be like, how am I doing today? Like, am I in trauma already? Like, can I handle this if I go into the field? Like, what's going to affect me today? So, handing those questions out so you can ask yourself, like, am I okay to, dig into some really hard issues about babies being stolen away, residential schools, um, oppression, people dying through the hands of uh, powerful folks in police. So we went through and made sure that people were trained on this. And for this show, I would say that we had one intern that was maybe youth age, 34 years old. But for the most part, I was trying to get more interns in for post-production and people who were had dealt with the subject matter before, so I could know for sure that they can handle it because it was a serious enough documentary that I needed to have seasoned people. But we did do internships, but they're actually more adult people who are trying to transfer their careers to another portion of production or post-production and learn some we have a lot of Indigenous people who do prep and journalism and production, but not a lot of people in post-production. So we ended up applying for the Indigenous Screen Office, who, by the way, was one of the main supports, and also Rogers and CBC and APTN. Um, uh, Indigenous Screen Office ended up giving us more sector grant money to develop Indigenous talent in post-production, which is great. I would like to check the time. How are we doing? We have 2 minutes before.
Yeah, you can go a little bit longer.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got about 5 left before we
Okay,
need to
great.
switch.
Thank you. Um, so yeah, so if you can imagine after doing 4 to 6 hour tapes in the field, interviewing 12 to 13 people, we had about 60 hours of tapes that we had to go through. So during the storytelling, I had Karen Cardinal, one of my, as being like the trainee story editor. We actually just literally did it old school. A lot of people, we tried different things. I tried AI to kind of like pull out different paragraphs and things. By the way, 6 months now it's been like a year. It works better now, but back then it was still herky-jerky about doing editing. So I was doing some tests and it was better. So what I ended up doing is like cutting, like printing out all of the interviews, ripping out pages essentially, and like pasting them all over the walls, looking like a bit of a nuts person. But really like Eloise Bombson still does this style, by the way. I've asked her. Like actually cutting out a paper edit and taping things together to see just like the flow of all the interviews. And then from there, cutting it down, transferring that into digital, then starting to like cut things digitally. But I wanted to actually see where the story was going first, and we had kept and decided to do the silos. We kind of decided to do the silos. We kind of decided to put in data and stats in those places. All those ideas kind of came from the beginning of our story editing, which is a whole process to get from rough assembly to then you need to go to rough cut, then fine cut, then locked, then the master. Um, and then each of those phases, you have to bring in your archives, you have to bring in your sound at the end, we had to go back to animation. We did a lot of VFX. We had to end up getting an art director to help us with the animation and the graphic effects and even making those newsprints. You have to make newsprints from scratch on screen because you can try to afford to buy newspapers to go on screen, but they're like sometimes they're $1,000 just to show like one for 1 second, which is too much money. Um, so that ends up being remade in graphics as well. You keep all the headlines and information, but you change the words in the photos. Okay, so I think what's really important is that I could not get everything that I wanted into this film. I mean, it would have to be a 5 hour film. I couldn't get to the forced sterilization. I couldn't get to the experimental tests on children in the Inuit communities that we discovered and had met people who had been experimented on. I couldn't get to all of like the murdered and missing women two-spirit people as a whole. There are things that I could not get into the story, but we had to follow the people and where they would let us go. And then at the end, try to find those places and those transitions to weave together. So as much as I want to be like this epic, uh like I guess Nick Maloney, our commissioner, called it like encyclopedic almost information, and I want it to be the first of its kind, which CBC said to us, congratulations, this is the first film of its kind up here in Canada. We do have these films in the South, like Ava DuVernay's The 13th, and other big idea films like like The Fog of War and Taxi the Dark Side. There's like a lot of films that are Michael Moore's idea, I guess, has big idea films, but Canada doesn't usually do them. So I think we were successful in what we wanted to do, and yeah, it's the first big idea film, I think, of this sort about systemic racism and what our people experience through their lifetime consistently in this country. So I think we did a good job, and it was part of a reconciliation experience between and me as an Indigenous journalist, and also David Perney as a settler journalist. So I think we've accomplished what we wanted to do. I think we can move on to questions. Thank you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so, so, so much for that, Leena. It was comprehensive. And yeah, like coming from a daily journalism background, somewhat vindicating and also disappointing to hear that even with 2 hours, you still don't have time to put everything you would want in. That makes sense. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Again, you can drop them in the chat and I can read them out, or feel free to raise your hand. We are still recording, and this part will still also be posted to YouTube.
Yeah, open floor.
Yeah,
Anybody want to know any parts of putting together a documentary, any of the complications? We had a lot of legal. What I didn't cover here is like how much lawyer hours we had to pay for legal. And also we did have to, even though it seems like we're only interviewing people's opinions, we did put out letters and questions to the other side to verify, fact check. The last thing, sorry, maybe I'll let you guys know this. We put in a 74-page annotated bibliography for all the facts and research. Besides like like thousands of documents we have on reports that we read, we did have to put forward an annotated bibliography in order to go through the journalistic standards and practices. Ryan, you have your hand raised.
Hi, Leena. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I guess my question, it's vague, so maybe sort of an overview. I'm just starting the journey of funding and looking for funding for a documentary project with a friend, and wondering what you would suggest in terms of just starting out.
Well, you're in development, like you haven't written your treatment or your idea yet down?
Oh, no, we have it. So it's a friend of mine who's a producer. We want it to be focused on this one subject that we both know, and it's around this big sort of live performance they're creating as kind of the end of their career, kind of career ending kind of performance. And so it's a documentary about the journey. So we have the idea, we have the subject, and it's
idea subject is great, but you need to go through this thing called development. And now in Canada right now, people are going through development. Some people are getting sent through development because the industry is, like, I call it, on a slump.
Okay.
So like in the housing market, you have like a buyer's or a seller's market. I'm the only person that does this, but it's a buyer's market right now, not a selling market. So people have to go through development phase 1, 2, and 3 often, and NFB is the same. Like, I worked there as well. So development really means that you need to actually write a treatment. So not you do an outline, but then you actually write a treatment, and then you have a binder, like a Bible of all your research, some of your pre-interviews already, some of your visual methodology, so like some stylistic choices, some photos that you researched, what your film will look like. Like, that's what you need to apply for. So you can't just go from an idea outline on one page and then get it funded. You actually have to go through development and make a Bible. So
and that is the development, that is that like a telefilm combination, CMF telefilm sort of
telefilm
thing?
is restricted. They only come in for distribution of documentaries, and that's 20% of what they offer. This is a really longer conversation, and happy to have it with you on the side. But like, every single funder has different rules, right? So development, you can go through ISO, you can go through Creative BC. Since you are working here right now, I don't know if you have to have a residency.
The other producer I'm working with is based here, so yeah.
Yeah, so Creative BC offers development. They just shut down the Indigenous Fund. Unfortunately, Rogers pulled out because they didn't have enough money. So, but yeah, so development is a different phase, and then you would, after you're done that, and then somebody greenlights you, then you go to production funding. You have multiple steps. It's harder than giving birth. It takes way longer than 9 months.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sarah,
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we have a question from the chat. So Holly asks if you could give advice on how to start from an idea to production fundraising. Do you think that a university certificate in documentary filmmaking gives you credibility at the start, or is it better to get experience in production?
Experience in production. I know I hate to say this. If you want to be a journalist, then university. If you want to have cred for knowing your chops in the process of journalism, because the process is objective. People aren't objective, but the process of journalism is objective, and I think people mistake that sometimes. So, if you want to do journalistic things, then yes, go to J school. If you want to do production, go to production school. But if you have an idea that's already good right now, you'd find somebody like I'm a producer. You'd find somebody who's a producer who already has experience, who has a track record, who has financial clout and has been known by banks and by funders. Then you attach yourself to them, and then they can get your project going before if you want to skip the school stuff. But it's always better to have been on a production, PA'd, volunteered, something, because knowing the process of journalism is way different than the process of actually making doc, which is it takes 2 years. Like the fastest ones take 2.5 years, maybe an hour, maybe like CBC Fifth Estate, they can turn something around in like 10 months for maybe 50 for a 45 minute, but most people take 2 years to make a doc. And sometimes people take average of 6 to 7 years. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Rose.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rose.
Rose, you're on mute.
Hi.
There we go.
So yeah, just to I had like a similar question to that. So just like obviously with that we face obstacles with that are like, for example, like in high school I wasn't striving to like qualify for credentials for university because I had other things at home to worry about and in the community to worry about. So I didn't qualify for university for journalism, even though that was
Neither did I, just so you know. I'm going to be honest. Neither did I. I had other problems too. I was emancipating. I was actually in foster care for the end of my high school years. And so I had lots of other stuff going on too. And then I had to transfer to college, then transfer to university, and then really hone in. I'd end up doing post-secondary 2 more times.
Okay. Great to know. Because yeah, that's the thing is, I'm coming to the end here of this fellowship, and it was amazing that I qualified for it. And because I was worried I have this dream and I'm not going to be able to do it because I don't have the credentials. So I was just wondering for, if say an intern, if I wanted to intern for example for it, on your show to be a showrunner or something like that, and to learn from you, do you look for those things, like is going for maybe a certificate somewhere, or if I could try and get a diploma, is that something you would recommend, or is
A
it
certificate or diploma I would recommend. They're shorter programs. I mean, when I sat down first, when I finished, I was like 3.5 years into psychology, sociology. I realized I was at the age of 19, I was never going to be a psychiatrist. Like it was way too competitive, and there's 5,000 people in my class. You had to compete for maybe like 8 spots in a master's program. I knew I wasn't going to do it. So I ended up wanting to go deeper into media, and I ended up like cold calling people, like, how can I come and help and work on your stuff? Just volunteering. I was in Edmonton. Can I work on your film? Can I work on your short film? Can I volunteer? Can I just come into your media company, talk to you about what you need, and like just be your secretary or like whatever. So that was me. And then I went back to film school, and then I met APTN people second year that APTN started, and they all kind of gathered around me when they met me, and they said, go to Capilano College. We are APTN's fully funding the program there. It was only 1 year program. I went there, switched to mainstream. And then in 2008, when there was another slump in the market, I went back to Institute of American Indian Arts and basically did my equivalent of my Indigenous governance studies as well as my film degree. So I ended up going to film school twice. So you can't be a volunteer showrunner. Showrunners are almost series producers of the entire show. So there's no way that's almost above the line. So there's above the line directors, producers, writers, line producers, and showrunners are on the almost at the top. And so film's a hierarchy like the military that you'd be asking to be the general when you came in first. You have to start as a production assistant or an office runner or a PA or something in order to do that.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I messed up my terminology word there
Okay.
completely. I meant showrunner as in yeah, that's what I meant was production, like just
Showrunners are actually
I'll
writers.
run and
They're
go
writers.
get you coffee
Yeah.
and just observe type of thing. So
Yeah.
sorry, I messed up.
Showrunners can be writers of a unscripted series, but they also can be series producers and then do less of the editing and writing in post. But they're like some of the top people. So they direct the sh they pretty much make the show happen in between all of that. So, but yeah, certificates are really good to pick up. Um, Also just like you can go at Capella Island College, I think BCIT. There's places that you can actually pick up just like film etiquette on set and just like learn some terminology and things there. A lot of it is vernacular and inside industry terminology. And then like melding journalism and film together, is through documentary. So
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for answering. Yeah, thanks.
yeah, and don't worry about your grades. Just do the work in the being in the field, working under somebody, grabbing an intern, grabbing some money to pay for an internship. I did that a couple times. I've been an intern at least 3 or 4 times. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's
thanks.
another question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, is it in the chat?
Somebody else had their hands up. I don't know.
Oh, I can't see. We've got time for one more. If anybody has one more. If not, I've got one that I think might kind of close things out in an okay way. What difference between producing documentary work and daily journalism stood out the most to you?
Oh, wow. I mean the length. Uh the length and the amount of money you need. So, you could make an article for $500, maybe, that's what you get paid. Maybe you can put out $200 in costs. Documentaries, you're talking about like you can do a documentary for 250,000, 500, then you get to 1 million, 2 million. When you're looking at Netflix, those are 10 to $11 million feature documentaries. So, we don't have that kind of money in Canada. But it's the length of time that you put in, the deep amount of research, and then everything you're shooting, it has to be viable to be on film. It can't be messed up in sound. There can't be any pixels on screen. You won't pass technical if you do that. So everything has to be perfect, which is it's a perfectionist nightmare a little bit, but you have to be perfect or else you won't get on to broadcast if you're going on to linear television.
Yeah, that would be different.
Yeah.
We have one more that
One
came
more,
in.
Jaden, yeah.
Okay, I can read it out. So Jaden says, I'm in my first year of J School through Carleton's certificate in journalism in Indigenous communities, but I'm very interested in documentary. How would you recommend getting into making documentary?
For sure. I'd say, I started, as I said at the beginning, going to the field with my recorder and recording. I actually think that doing audio journalism as well as short video YouTube clips or short CBC video clips or, BBC even has. So working as a video journalist, as a radio journalist, gives you an idea of like what you're editing for in media because you're working backwards. You're like, what do I have as tape? And then how do I put this together? Video is a bit harder because you have to think of both the visuals and the audio that's happening. Radio kind of gives you a radio edit, which is actually what you do when you first go into editing after you have all your tape. You actually end up doing a radio edit as your first cut of your feature film. So we call it a radio edit. So listening and understanding that is more important than writing articles. I'm gonna get slapped by others. But
I'm a print girl.
I know. And I'm not saying I did print too, so I'm not saying it's, and I did print, well, I did digital.
But if you want to get into documentary.
I did magazine print and then went to digital articles. But you have to understand tape though. Like how do you record sound bites? How do you weave them together? What is a transition? Because you're not putting your voice in. You're not putting those things together. There's no sound of God. There is no like where you can write in your articles. You can write whatever transitions you want to, whatever facts you want down. There's nobody saying in tape and audio, you have to have somebody saying it on camera or else you absolutely have nothing to have transitions with in your articles. So you can't just go in your article. The articles actually work against you because you think you could fill in all these words and you could do it in post later. That's not it. You have to go into the field, play around with tape, play around with video, play around with even recording your elders with radio and understanding how to put that all together and then knowing what you're missing. You're like, oh yeah. And once you start to understand what you're missing, that is when you start to get into documentary. because then you know that you need way more to play with in the field. So I would say if you're going to go from J school, start making your courses and your coursework. Ask if you can put in a little podcast interview. Ask if you put in a video piece instead of articles, and then you really will start to understand editing and what you need in post. And like the editors make the best directors because they know what they need in hand at the end. So and start to volunteer for people. If you start to hear about people doing a little bit longer of your friend's making a 15-minute YouTube video. Oh, can I join you? Like that's how you can get into documentary. Start with, 5, 10, 15 minutes. Get up to, if you're lucky, you get to a 30-minute or you get to a 45-minute, an hour, and then you can do features.
Excellent. That was a perfect answer. Thank you so much. And like a perfect question, Jaden, to round us out.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a very good one. Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. We so very much appreciate it. If you have any feedback, you can send it to canadian.programs@jhr.ca, which I will drop in the chat.
Thank you.
Yes. Leena, where can people find you?
At Leena Minifie on all the social.
Look, fabulous. And please check out The Good Canadian on CBC. Yeah.
Film. The Good Canadian film is on all the socials too. Sorry.
Yes. CBC Gem, ATI Lummi, or YouTube. Yeah. Please take a look. And if you enjoyed this, please stay tuned to JHR and IJ's social media. We will be continuing more entries in the series between now and December. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care.